And we're live. Hi, everyone. My name is Leela Sinha. Welcome back to Impolite Conversations. This is probably one of the more polite conversations that I'm going to talk about. What I want to talk about today is the relationship between power on the one hand, and community on the other hand, and specifically leadership in community from a place of power. So, most of us start out without a lot of institutional power. We might have power because of our birth privilege. We might have power because of our parents, but we're not institutionally powerful as like infants, most of us. And as time passes, some of us rise to power. Some of us realize we're intensives, right? Because intensives tend to end up as leaders of institutions, mostly because we don't like authority unless it's our own. Like we tend to be really resistant to other people's authority unless we make a really conscious choice to engage with other people's authority. So eventually, typically, we strike out on our own in some way or other. We become founders. We found nonprofits, or we found companies, or we become entrepreneurs in some other way. We become serial entrepreneurs. These are all things that we tend to be attracted to in terms of ways to make money because we live under capitalism, and that's something a lot of us have to do. So we're rising through the ranks in one way or another. Often we get ourselves fired a bunch of times because we just can't fit ourselves into existing institutional structures without getting really irritated and trying to fix them. And some institutions are really glad that we're in there trying to fix them, and some institutions are super not glad to have someone trying to fix them. But eventually we get to this place where either we have managed to stay in the organization long enough to rise to a level of relative power, institutional power, or we have left the institutions we tried to be part of and have moved on to trying to be our own leaders in some way, to trying to start our own organizations. And then we do start our own organizations. The process of starting your own organization is a really interesting one because you have to both pay attention to what other people want, because your organization needs to be responding to some need, right? It's a company and you're trying to sell something, or it's a nonprofit and you're trying to engage people in the work of the nonprofit. But one way or another, you have to get people on board. You have to attract people. And that's always an interesting thing when you are used to being seen as eccentric, because the odds are that you are perceived as being out in left field by the vast majority of people that you have known before your entrepreneurial or whatever leadership journey, right? So people have all thought that you maybe should try something a little more normal. Could you just, bring your ideas down to earth, be more realistic, right? If you've ever heard anybody say, be more realistic, this is you, right? And you have, in order to pursue what you know you're supposed to be doing at that moment, you have had to learn to shut it down, blow them off, say, thank you for sharing, and then go on with what you were doing. There's a proverb that goes around periodically, and it's attributed to Chinese, but I have no idea whether it actually has any Chinese provenance at all. But it says, those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt the person doing it. And in fact, that has to be our attitude in many cases in order for us to be able to function in any kind of reasonable, forward-looking way, right? Because what we're doing requires us to move in a direction that people don't think is possible. If people thought it was possible, it would already be done. And if it was already done, we wouldn't be doing it. So we have to develop a kind of a thick skin about people thinking that we're wrong about what we're doing or how we're doing it. And some of us are really sensitive. A lot of us are really sensitive. And so it takes us a minute. It takes us a bit of effort to develop that habit of saying, yeah, thank you for your input. I appreciate it. I'll sift through it to see if there's anything useful there. Often we don't usually sift through it, and we have to teach ourselves to do that too. I'll sift through it to see if there's anything useful there, but I'm not going to let it deter me from my larger vision. Which means that often by the time you get to a relative place of stability with your organization, it's kind of running, you have a little bit of runway, you're, looking at planning months and years out rather than planning for the next couple of days and hoping you make your financial goals and all that. By the time you get to that point, you don't actually have any peers around you anymore, because all the people that you used to hang out with, while they might still be your friends, are not the people who are able to understand and work with you on the specific challenges of your situation. They've all told you it can't be done, and they told you it couldn't be done like 8 months ago. And now here you are doing it, and that's awkward, right? That's a hard thing to come back from. It's hard to rebuild those relationships if you're accustomed to hearing, oh no, you can't do that. Oh, why do you think you can do that? Oh, that's not really possible or viable. At some point you stop sharing your ideas and your work and whatever with those people, and you stop sharing your challenges, because if they can't be supportive when you're just having an idea, then they probably aren't going to be as useful in solving the challenge, because often the response to the challenge is, well, don't you think you should just get a real job? This is my job. This is my real job. And that's not helpful. So we end up letting those people fall away, or at least allowing them to come out of our work brain circle, right? They might still be people that we have lunch with, that we hang out with, that we love very deeply even, but not people that we spend time with. So then what? Then we're isolated. Then we're pretty isolated. And when people say entrepreneurship is lonely, often this is what they're talking about. And the challenge at this point is that we are just coming into a place of momentum and success often. And where success is defined as, I can keep doing this probably for sure. And this is the moment where we actually start to have some power, because we're no longer in a panic survival mode, either for ourselves or for our organization. Now we're starting to think, we're starting to plan, we're starting to be in a place where strategy is possible. We've kind of risen up the company Maslow hierarchy of needs. I should draw that. We've risen up the company, the institutional hierarchy of needs from, oh my God, I need some money, and oh my God, I need clients, to this place of like, oh, what could I do from here? What could I do from there? I'm hiring people. How do I want to be an employer? How do I want to? And this is the point at which, this is the critical moment, right? This is that pivot moment where everything can go right or everything can go wrong. This is the moment in which megalomaniacs are born. because this is the moment in which, without a peer group, without a context, without anybody to hold us in relationship with what we believe and what we understand to be right, we can fail. We can just fail. Because we will start to make decisions in isolation. And when you make a decision in isolation, it's very easy to make a decision that doesn't take even the majority of people into account, much less everybody. So when you make a decision and it's in this kind of bubble of entrepreneurship, what you often end up with is a decision that serves your company or serves some of the needs present, but doesn't serve all of the needs. It just doesn't. It doesn't get there. And there's no one to point that out. There's no one to say, hey, have you considered? There's no one to say, how about you? And the problem is that if the people that we used to spend a lot of our time with say that to us, we've already trained ourselves not to listen to them, because there were so many times when they were being negative, when we needed them to not be, about things that weren't about morals, that were just about possibility. This is the need for community. And I mean a community of peers, I mean a community of colleagues, and I mean specifically a community of colleagues who share your values. We need communities of colleagues that share our values, specifically our values. I'm in some great communities, but it's very hard to find a collection of people who are starting a company and believe in profit and believe in wealth as a transformative force, and also believe in ethics. That's a hard combination to find. It shouldn't be, because what we know about businesses is that they actually function better, and the bottom line actually looks better when you take into account morals and ethics and taking good care of your people. Like, all of that stuff really does matter, and it actually makes it a better experience for everyone. But even though it makes it a better experience, even though it makes it a more stable company, even though it takes away all of that like energy lost to drama that happens whenever someone is not happy, that happens whenever someone is uncomfortable, that happens whenever someone feels like their needs aren't getting met and they're still coming to work, right? All of that can get dramatically reduced by keeping your needs of your employees in mind, by keeping your ethics in mind, by doing good stuff. And doing good things has great potential for publicity, right? On the other hand, most people are at the founder stage, most people at the founder stage are mostly talking about runway and funding and bottom line and minimum viable product, all very important, but you can't have a sustainable organization without more than that. Sorry, I keep bumping my mic. And so what do you do if you can't have a more sustainable organization without that? You have to hang on to the concept of morals and the importance of those things, but how do you hang on to those things? How do you hang on to those things if you're busy and overwhelmed and trying to come up with answers to all the problems and kind of in this bubble? Well, the answer is you get out of the bubble, and the answer to how you get out of the bubble is to find other leaders who are doing the same kind of work with the same kind of desires, and to form a community with them, and ideally form a community with a guide. Form a community with somebody who's doing that with you. Somebody whose job it is to oversee the portfolio of ethics, to oversee the portfolio of kind of rigorous examination of your choices. Even at high speed, even when you don't have a lot of time, when it's a lot of runway, when you've got to make a decision fast, that's fine. But have a framework ahead of time, right? Have a moral framework or an ethical framework ahead of time. How do I make a decision that feels a little ethically shaky? How do I make a decision when I have to balance the needs of the individual against the needs of the organization? How do I make a decision when I have to balance the needs of the individual against like financial survival? How do I make all of these things fit together? The answers aren't easy. It's not like you should just know. That's not how that works. That's why you need community. You need community with a guide. And without that, can you still do it? Yes. Are you much more likely to fall off the rails? Also, yes. So this is the stuff I'm thinking about, right? Like, how do we prevent morally bereft leadership in the startup world? How do we prevent that? Because it's epidemic. Like this, with community, together. That's how we do it. Thanks for listening. I'll see you soon.